Good morning. In those days, there appeared in Israel men who were breakers of the law. Let us make alliance with the Gentiles around us. Let's see, what else did they do? They went to the king. They authorized him to introduce the way of living of the Gentiles. They built a gymnasium. They covered the mark of their circumcision. They allied themselves with the Gentiles. They abandoned the Holy Covenant. They sold themselves into wrongdoing. How many of us have done that today, right, as Christians? How many of us have decided that I'd much rather be friends with the world, I'd much rather ally myself with the world, I would much rather build big gymnasiums or stadiums or whatever it be, I'd much rather be like the world than be a Christian. I'd much rather profane the Sabbath, I would much rather conform to the world, I would much rather choose to live a selfish life. Probably all of us to some extent, right? Maybe not quite as bad as the Jews did here. One of the reasons that the arch heretic Martin Luther removed Maccabees from the Bible was because it was written in Greek instead of Hebrew, and that's because the Jews were in exile, right? And they were under oppression, and so they even lost their language for a generation. And so the deuterocanonical books, the 7 books that Martin Luther threw away, were written in Greek because at the time they didn't know Hebrew, because they were living such lives that they were removed from their Jewish custom and their way of life and their following of God. And so it was this Maccabean revolt that kind of led to the return to the practice of Judaism. But for us, I think, we've been so secularized that we haven't lost our language. Well, we did lose our Latin language, I suppose. Not really lose it; it's still there. We just don't like it. We protest against it. But we've become so secularized that we think, well, growing up, nobody did anything on Sunday. All the stores are closed. But, well, now, whatever. Stores are open. Chick-fil-A is the one holdout, but everything else, it's a different time, right? Yeah, okay, I get it. As Catholics, we're weird, right? We do weird things that others don't do, that other Christians don't do. Because we're in America, which is a Protestant country, we're not supposed to show our Catholicism. It's interesting, though, because Catholicism is becoming cool, especially among young people. And so we see that embrace. But it's important for us not to reject our tradition, not to reject the good things that have come before us, not to reject the things that formed us, but rather to embrace them, to recognize how the traditions of the church, how they lead us to holiness. So today we celebrate the feast day of St. Elizabeth of Hungary. St. Elizabeth, of course, was a princess in Hungary. She was married at 14 and she was widowed at the age of 20. And she regained her dowry and she used it to establish a hospital where she took care of the poor. And this was in the 1200s. So, we hear all the stories about how the church was so backwards in the Dark Ages, the quote-unquote Dark Ages, that is, and how we didn't do anything good for society. We invented hospitals. That's a pretty big deal. Again, the hospitals have kind of, been secularized as well, right? The hospitals have covered the mark of their circumcision as well. Now instead of going to a hospital to be cured, you go to a hospital to have your child murdered, to have your young child mutilated. Obviously, that's a broad statement, not all hospitals, but even some Catholic hospitals. The USCCB last week at their plenary meeting put out a statement saying that Catholic hospitals shouldn't trans kids. Yeah. Okay, good on them, I guess, for saying, don't do that. But, specifically, Catholic hospitals shouldn't mutilate children. Okay, Glad we have that statement written down now. Because we're so kind of focused on, like, well, how do we fit in? Even the statement that came out of the Vatican a couple weeks ago about not using the term for the Blessed Mother of mediatrix of all graces or co-redemptrix, which, whether or not that's an appropriate title isn't really the point of this, but from my understanding, the reason for not using those titles is because, well, it might be confusing to Protestants. So should we throw away Maccabees too? Should we just go full on Martin Luther? Not criticizing the bishops. I wouldn't want to be a bishop. I get it. They have a very difficult tasks in front of them. But when we're trying to proclaim the gospel, when we're trying to show that there's something different and better than just living for this world, there has to be something radical about it. We have to really kind of change. We've got to be willing to not fit, to be different. So on this feast day of St. Elizabeth of Hungary, who so boldly proclaimed the message of Christ's love to the poor and caring for them and healing them, let us pray that we may also be agents of that mercy, agents of the gospel, that we may be able to proclaim boldly Christ crucified and risen to all who need to hear the message.